All right, it is fight news happening now with John Ramdeen and Robin Black. We are heading into the weekend in Cleveland, the UFC's first card at the Quicken Loans Arena. But two guys that are not going to be participating on Saturday's card, Ray Borg, who has come down with an illness, and the guy that is just snake bit when it comes to luck, Ian Uncle Creepy McCall. This is his second fight in a row. The other was Justin Scoggins, who had to pull out the week of for their fight. I mean, for Ian McCall, this is just the epitome of frustration.
You got to take some positives if you're Ian McCall. You know, the guy's been away from the game for quite a long time. I think a lot of people recognize that Ian McCall was a fighter that belonged in the UFC when he was fighting back in Tachi. So you look at these last two fights, yeah, he didn't get a chance to fight. We've talked
through no fault of his own.
No fault of his own, but he was ready to fight. I know that's one of the rewards for fighters, that you get to get in there after spending 10 or 12 weeks getting ready for your opponent. But the reality is, for the Scoggins fight, he got some money. The UFC paid him his show and win bonus. I'm sure they're going to do the same thing in this scenario. You get two fights, you don't have to fight, then you get a third fight. The question is, will he be able to fight in the third fight, or will he look at this as,
Robin,
you know what, it's not meant to be?
This has literally happened to you. Tell me the mental side of all that work, and at the end of the day, there is no light at the end of the tunnel. There is no fight. There is no reward for all that. Beyond, I mean, he absolutely deserves his show money.
Yeah, I mean, at least he's a veteran, you know, like a legit veteran. I like Ian, you know, and he's a great fighter. He's one of the top fighters ever at that division. It totally sucks. You're going to go through all of the things, but you did all the hard part, but you don't get to do the fun part. And there's all kinds of hard parts that people don't even realize. So after making weight and not going to have to fight, you're going to replenish and eat in ways that are healthy-ish, but you don't have to fight tomorrow night. So you're going to break some rules. You're going to have farts like you've never imagined. Just little things like that he's going to deal with.
Best analyst in the game,
Yeah,
folks.
best analyst in the game right here, folks. But I'm telling you, the farts this guy's going to go through, upset stomach, all kinds of weird little things. But you make a good point. I like this super positive John Ramdeen approach. He's getting paid. He's getting paid, and he's going to be in great shape, and you're coming off injuries. You go through it. You don't get the injuries that you'll get in the fight. You recover. You go back. You get paid 3 times for what's going to be one fight, and farts aside, I think he's gonna be all right.
Not the answer I expected, but one I'll take nonetheless. Let's discuss quickly. We haven't really touched upon the current season of The Ultimate Fighter. It began last week. It's a unique format where they've taken outside regional champions, coached by Joseph Benavidez and Henry Cejudo, who will also fight on the finale. And the winner of this tournament gets to challenge Demetrius Johnson on that same card. You are shaking your head, not a fan.
Oh, I mean, I'm a fan of the way the season is playing out. You're seeing all these guys that deserve to be in the UFC. But as you talked about at the opening of the show, I had a chance to talk to Yanni Sherbatov, who has, I think, 6 professional fights. So you win the show, you have 6 professional fights. I think the fights in the house are exhibition fights. Mm-hmm. And then you go on to fight the greatest fighter in the history of fighting, perhaps. I think most analysts out there recognize how good Demetrius Johnson is. It feels like there should be a slow build for some of these guys who are now dipping their toe into the UFC. You get a couple of victories, and now you're at the top of the mountain. You can understand how that would be a lot to handle. And now I understand a lot of people are waiting for this opportunity, and they could shine, but man, that's a tough assignment.
I'll tell you, though, I agree with you. Nobody should fight Demetrius Johnson. He's just going to get knocked out or submitted. He's the best fighter in the world. He really is. And he will stay that way as long as he puts in the work that he's putting in. He stays focused. He doesn't believe his own hype, but he does all that, and he doesn't believe his own hype. He's a serious workhorse. It's very special that we get to live in an era where this guy's fighting. But I'll tell you, Tim Elliott is a legit 125-pounder.
Should have been cut.
Yeah, I mean, and he is one of the top talents. That guy will go in there, if he were to win, for example, would go in there with absolute confidence. And Yanni, man, he goes out and he trains at Greg Jackson's. He trains with the top guys in the world. And ask any of the Jackson 25ers or 35ers. They'll tell you this is a top 10 type talent. So these guys, I mean, who's supposed to fight him? You know what I mean? Who's supposed to fight Demetrius Johnson? When you're the best fighter in the world.
Joseph Benavidez. Ian McCall.
Love to see it. Both have fought him twice.
I know.
Both have fought
He
him
has
twice.
4 wins over those 2 guys.
I know, but that's
3
the
wins
reality.
and a draw. Ian is the last guy to not get beat
That is
by
true.
Demetrius Johnson.
Now, in regards to Joseph Benavidez, should he beat Henry Cejudo on the finale? That's 6 in a row for Benavidez since the last Demetrius Johnson fight. I think at that point, we are ready to revisit a
Sure.
third fight for Joseph Benavidez at
Yes.
this point. You know, it's not really an option for him, I think, going up to 135 with Cody Garbrandt in the mix there in that division. I think you win 6 in a row. It's been 3 years since the last fight in December of 2013. I don't think you can deny Benavidez. If he beats Henry Cejudo, I'm ready to see the fight again.
And I agree with you from, when you look at things logically, it makes sense. But for Joseph Benavidez, is there something in his mind, say, what happens if I try and I lose again against this guy? Is this going to, no?
No, not a guy like this. This is a lifetime of work to get almost there. I mean, that first fight was even closer than the second fight was, and he did as well as anybody's ever done. This guy's life is push, 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 and you fail once, you try again. You fail once, you try again. The art of fighting or achieving greatness, if anything, if you study the greats, it's a lifetime of failing, improving, till you no longer fail. That guy will fight him 27 times if he gets the chance. Uriah's exactly the same. Their culture is exactly the same. You know what, Pollock? You make a great point. The only fight in the world I really want to see Demetrius fight is Joseph Benavidez, because
or Dominic Cruz at 135 pounds.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are other great fights for sure. But if you take Demetrius Johnson out of existence, Joseph Benavidez is the best 125-pounder who's ever lived. He deserves to get there. And if he beats an Olympic gold medalist who likes to talk about his gold medal a lot, and I think we'll probably see that on this season, he deserves it. Yeah.
And I think the fact that both are fighting that same night on the finale, you get impressive wins from Benavidez and Demetrius Johnson. What other direction are people going to conclude after that? But
what are you trying to do with this division? Aren't you trying to sell the division? Is the division just 2 guys? It's like we're just going to have Joseph Benavidez fighting Demetrius Johnson until he gets a win?
Yeah,
John, it's
I'm
not
cool
like
with
there
it.
hasn't been
I'm
a
cool
steady
with it,
stream.
man.
Like
I know.
Demetrius has just passed every single test thrown at him.
That's right.
This concept on the show is because we don't have anybody else at this point that isn't a rematch.
And I totally understand. And I understand the UFC's trying to develop that division. They're trying to make it palatable. They're trying to get all the eyeballs onto 125 pounds. It's a difficult thing to do. So I think one of the things you can do is entice Demetrius Johnson by going up to 135 pounds, whether it's Dominic Cruz, whether it's Cody Garbrandt, whether it's Frankie Edgar, who drops down because his coaches are talking about him moving down to 100.
Demetrius Johnson would do to Cody Garbrandt.
I understand, but just the idea of you're trying to give him the biggest fights possible, and I don't know if those fights are at 125 pounds.
We got Tyler Warman in our ear. Tyler, or anybody, can you tell me, I don't know nothing about football, but have there been Super Bowls where the same teams play each other many times? Have there? Sure. Yeah, I just got sure. Yeah, was the exact word I got. Of course, because they're the best teams. Right. This happens in many sports, sometimes for a decade. If the 2 best hockey teams end up in the Stanley Cup final every year, if the 2 best football teams end up in whatever the final is in football, the 2 best fighters in a division can fight each other 4, 5, 6 times if they really are that much better.
I totally understand that, but if you're watching those games, if it's the Stanley Cup final 5 years in a row and the champions keep beating the challengers every single time, don't you think people are going to get tired of that?
Maybe. I mean, sure. But fortunately in fighting, we also got Stipe versus Overeem, and we got a wrestler taking on a brown belt who's really dangerous, and we got all these other things. If we're not paying, if everybody thinks we're not paying to see, the 125-pounders, just let's have the best fights.
Stick around. John Ramden's going to be chatting with Yanni Sherbatov about this Ultimate Fighter season, and be sure to tune in to our UFC 203 preview show Saturday night at 6 p.m. Eastern.